Welcome, everyone. We're on the hour. I'll just give it a minute or two as people gather. Hi, everyone. I'll kick things off. So welcome to the Sky Community Call for the 10th of September. Hopefully you can all see the screen and hear me okay. Let me know in the chat in case of any issues. I'll start with our now standard disclaimer. Anything we discuss in this call is purely informational purposes and is not investment, legal, or tax advice. I will move to the agenda, and we're going to follow the same format we introduced last week. We'll spend a little bit of time going through the fixed part of the call, which are weekly highlights from the ecosystem, and we'll also be looking at some of our ecosystem dashboards. We'll then be joined around 1:15 by Rune this week for the weekly deep dive, which will be a more detailed discussion with Q&A. And the subject for this week will be capital formation and also looking at how specifically agents drive Sky ecosystem products adoption. So with that, I'll jump straight into the highlights. And the idea here is really to just capture, what is catching everyone's attention on the forum, on crypto Twitter, and just from the wider market landscape. I'll start with the upcoming Spark spell. Lots of details in their post for enhancements across their product suite for Spark Liquidity Layer, for Spark Lend, for their activity with Morpho Vaults, and as always, full transparency available on the Spark Data Hub, where you can accompany in real time their allocations and their performance. So both for Spark Lend and Morpho, and also dig further in. And we'll keep exploring these dashboards as we go through future calls. The second call out is the upcoming launch of a new USDS feature, STUSDS, which is really an offering that looks to create junior risk capital for Sky-backed loans. So something that moves up that risk-reward curve, offering the ability to earn a higher yield. And of course, that higher yield compensates for the associated risks. So no doubt, as we approach launch for this, there's going to be a lot more information coming out across the forum, but it's already started for those interested in delving into the details. So technical scope, contract details, you can see it all there. And also STUSDS will have its own beam rate setter configuration and details of that, and how the sort of the risk management part of that is programmed all on the forum. The third call out is over the last week, we have seen some ecosystem funding requests coming in. So, will be actually being processed. So it's gone through the process of being requested and approved, and you've seen them processed, as always, with full transparency. Multi-sig wallets have been set up. You can go in and look at those. The first one was 3 million for accessibility rewards, and we've spent a long time looking at accessibility rewards in previous calls. It really is one of the most prime primitives and mechanisms to drive distribution via stars. And as that scales up, I think it's really good that it comes with this transparency where you can see it. It will also be much better categorized moving forward in info.sky.money. So you can actually, they'll break out the accessibility rewards payments, as will also happen for integration boost. And in general, you'll see that sort of more granularity in how these expenses are being tracked, something that's been widely requested. The second funding that was processed was quite a relatively large value for the Sky simplification process, so 8 million transferred to that project. And with Maker Endgame and Launch Plan behind us, I think Rune has described this as sort of the spiritual successor of how we continue to evolve the ecosystem and the system moving forward. So various mechanisms are going to be coming out of this, including the treasury management function, monthly settlement cycle, so new operational mechanisms as the ecosystem simplifies. And all of these components and new mechanisms will also be worked into info.sky.money to give the community full transparency of visibility. And the last call out, and probably, I guess, the big point of discussion across DeFi this week, is the hyperliquid USDH strategy, or the request for bid almost. And we've seen a tweet that Rune has posted detailing exactly how that could be powered by Sky. Very lots of detail there, lots to jump into, and I think that by itself sort of merits its own deep dive. But certainly, it really does highlight just some of the different models of stable coins that are out there. It's been really interesting to see some of the discussion in terms of pros and cons of different approaches and different models. It'll be very interesting to see how the hyperliquid community decide to go forward with this. And one of the most interesting ones that I've been seeing, which I think is completely relevant for the Sky community, is the discussion around benefits of decentralization versus taking a sort of a very strong regulatory first framework approach, especially with the Genius framework. And yeah, so lots happening there, and I'm sure that's going to keep us lots to follow as we move forward. So I'll jump into the dashboards review with all of that said. The first one, as always, info.sky.money. And I wanted to jump into the fundamentals that we looked at last week, because there was a pending item. There was a lot of discussion around the stability fee income and what exactly this number represents. And as we discussed and clarified, this really is a forward-looking estimate, very different to what, for example, Stakehouse provides with their backward-looking numbers. And to get even more granular, I'd sort of just highlight that it's a forward-looking estimate of what the revenue would be if the current state of the ecosystem stays exactly as is over the next 12 months. However, we know the ecosystem is completely dynamic, and that's why this number is volatile. So it will change as stability fees change, as the collateral composition changes, and as supply changes. But it's, I think, the feedback that I'm taking from the community is what they would really appreciate seeing is perhaps a backward-looking number of actual revenues, and that's certainly something that we'll pass on to the product teams managing this. So we'll continue, obviously, tracking this prime fundamentals dashboard in future calls. For this week, I thought it'd be interesting to also take a quick look at the Maker to Sky upgrade dashboard, especially important with the upcoming delayed penalty deadline. And you can see the recent activity that we're seeing, unsurprisingly, in terms of those upgrades. It's roughly, you'll see here at the bottom, it's roughly a third in terms of remaining Maker. What was upgraded in V1 of the contract, which was the bidirectional Maker Sky upgrade contract, and what has been upgraded so far in the existing V2 contract, which is the one way, but certainly one which I think will be interesting to watch over this next week as we come into that penalty deadline. As always, I'm going to also take a quick look at the demand side analysis that we track at Viridian. It's actually a very quiet week, so this is going to be very quick. You'll see if I jump into Sky, then USDS, it's a calm sea this week. There really is very little to report. There's a slight uptick in Sky savings that has been compensated by a slight downtick in Sky token rewards. You can see the saving SUSDS uptick over the week here, and the downtick in token rewards here at the bottom. I guess, interesting to see an increase in exposure from what we believe is just in sun this last day. One thing I have seen in terms of community request is more granularity in terms of DAI demand, and we probably should have added that from the beginning. So we have corrected that now and also added that clearly a key product for the Sky ecosystem. You probably get more out of this by zooming out in terms of time frame just to see the trend. So I'm going to go to quarter to date, come back to DAI, and you will see what a lot of people have been reporting, which is this uptick in demand, really, especially in August. And we've really struggled to pinpoint exactly where that's coming from. A lot of DAI in terms of demand, it really is driven very heavily by this long tail of other users, which are holdings, smaller holdings, that it's very hard for us to identify at a granular level. But anyway, we've made this available for anyone in the community who's interested in tracking this. So that's the dashboard section done. And next up, and I do believe we have Rune with us, will be the deep dive with Rune to talk about capital formation and how agents are driving Sky ecosystem products adoption. So Rune, Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Rajiv. Hello, everyone. Oh, wait a second. Can you hear me? I'm getting some error.
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, great. Cool. All right. Yeah. I mean, the topic was I will talk about capital formation and stars. And I would imagine there's also some people that want to talk about the USDH proposal. And it kind of connects together, those two topics. And then on top of that, of course, I will also just do AMA and talk about whatever people want to learn about or hear about, and also address this thing about like the expenses part. In fact, actually, okay, let me start with that. Right, so there was this update about the 8 million in outflows that happened, I think, in the beginning of this week, in the last spell. And so the reason why that happened, that payment happened, was because there is still some final payments and basic expenses that for essentially to keep the ecosystem entities more resilient should not be sort of commingled with the Sky Frontier Foundation and the Fortification Foundation. So it happened in this sort of separate transaction. And a part of it is actually a pretty cool incentive program that's designed to boost the adoption of STUSDS on, for instance, Aave, because it's just going to be incredibly beneficial for Sky if you have STUSDS being looped on Aave and Morpho and other such platforms. And then the other part of it is basically liquidity bootstrapping funds that are really important in order to just drive the liquidity of the tokens and ecosystem. But that's the type of activity that needs to be sort of very carefully handled and segregated from other entities. And this should almost with total certainty be the last expense of this type, where there's a sort of like a part of Atlas that has some money set aside, and then it can result in an outflow of funds for a spell. There will still be large capitalizations of the stars, right? So there's still going to be like more stars launch, and they will have these like large capital transfers from the surplus buffer into the stars in order to capitalize it. But these transactions are not going to be reflected in the profits of the protocol, and that's because, of course, Sky gets tokens in return for these transactions, and there's also like a limited number of them. It's not completely clear exactly how many, but it will be something like, well, so in total there will be around 17 Genesis agents, with some clarifications and like some final details being fleshed out for the very last ones of them. And they will not launch immediately, right? They will launch over like a period of as much as 2 to 3 years from now, as they sort of roll out over the in the future. But they will, I mean, and many of them will start operating much earlier, and then of course there will be like a time until they launch their tokens. But then when the tokens launch, Sky will get a part of the tokens depending on how much they've been capitalized with. And then at the end of this year, so all of these capitalizations, they will all happen before the end of this year. Then at the end of this year, it'll be completely over for any kind of transactions, like any type of sort of arbitrary fixed transaction, whether it is capitalization of stars or it is like paying particular expenses, like this simplification process. And well, okay, I forgot the point I was just gonna make. Yeah, well, that's addressing these expenses. Then I want to talk about stars and capital formation, and then like the Hyperliquid proposal and all of this stuff that happened, because that was like a really exciting event. Like, so I think first and foremost, like actually right after I made the proposal, after getting pinged by a lot of people of like, oh my God, we got to do this. We've got to make some kind of proposal. This is a huge opportunity. Lots of people being very excited, both sort of coming from the Hyperliquid community, but then also in the Sky community. Like actually the immediate reaction from the Hyperliquid community was just extremely positive, and there were a lot of people who were like just mind blown by the fact that a project like Sky exists and how it really adheres to decentralization in a way that very few projects do, right? And really takes a different approach than almost any other project in crypto. So there was this like very positive, overwhelmingly positive response. And actually at first I thought there was like a real chance we could win the ticker, just because the immediate reaction was so positive, and there seemed to be basically no negative reaction. However, I think now it's like it looks to me like the race is down to some native stablecoin or Paxos, which I also think is cool. I mean, I actually, from my perspective, the most important objective was that this was like a huge opportunity to showcase Sky to a much broader audience, right? It's rare that we're able to really communicate very broadly all of the unique characteristics of Sky, and this was actually a case where there were a lot of people who were willing to learn and actually listened and understood some of our concepts. And I also think what's really cool is that the basic concept of the star actually was able to kind of break through, and there were a lot of people who understood this and were really excited about it, right? And it was seen as one of the major highlights of the proposal of it. And so that's also more generally what I want to talk about, right? That what is so incredibly powerful about stars is that they can be used as a way to basically set a sort of autonomous, independent process that will then kind of grow by itself, right? And sort of fulfill some purpose all by itself. So, for instance, like a much more powerful way to engage with Hyperliquid is to set up a Hyperliquid focused star and then let that do the work. Even more so if it then like farms out its tokens on Hyperliquid, or even takes investment from Hyperliquid aligned funds or users on the blockchain or something like that, and they end up holding the tokens. So you then have this like local native connection to the star, which then makes it a much more strong bridge to that local community. And I actually surprisingly think that there were like, there was like quite a lot of people that actually saw that value proposition, despite how extremely advanced and complex it is for somebody who's like just understands Hyperliquid and like understands perps and buybacks and just like simple DeFi concepts. So that you can actually, that there's clearly more and more understanding of crypto and the technology and its potential. And there's like over time, it gets easier and easier to basically get people to understand and sort of hook onto the concept of stars and how they're so powerful. So I think that's like that's really cool. And what will be even more cool is, of course, when we really start to showcase not just Spark and Grove, which are like stars that are used to sort of run and grow Sky's core business, DeFi and RWA, but also stars that actually begin to extend what Sky can do and do things that Sky wasn't traditionally capable of doing. So that part is going to be really exciting. Yeah, I mean, that's basically, I made the similar point 2 weeks ago on the last call. So I think that's like really the basic idea, right? And well, maybe the last point to make about capital formation is that the capital formation is this concept of how you can bring multiple different types of like investors together, or different types of capital with different types of risk tolerance, right? Which is something also that like Sky isn't just like a launch pad for stars, right? It's actually much more advanced because the stars can both get internal junior risk capital through the people who actually directly buy or farm the star tokens. They can also, it's also used, they will also launch the features of external junior risk capital, which is a slightly different type of a way to capitalize a star, and then senior risk capital, which is yet again a different risk appetite, which then attracts a different user base. And then, of course, most importantly, the massive super senior position of the stablecoin holders, which is really what having the stablecoin is what enables all the other layers of the stack of different types of capital. But also the other way around, like having the different types of capital is what makes it possible for Sky to deliver super strong and outperforming risk-adjusted return to USDS holders, which is then going to help actually grow USDS significantly. Yeah. All right. Well, I will just go through the questions. Seems like there's just 2 questions here. The first is how many stars in your launch, and how do we know they're coming instead of just planned? So obviously this is like totally going to change, but like I'll throw out some like some like numbers and timelines based on my current knowledge. But it is like changing very much and really like adapting, like the way that the Sky Frontier Foundation is planning this and supporting this is like really it's still very fluid because the way that it has, there's only one chance to roll out the Genesis agents, and so they have to be done in the best possible way. And recently there was like a major, what used to be like a major star project that was basically sort of simplified and delayed and basically taken off sort of the priority compared to some of the other ones. So that's just like, that's just like there's still a lot of the plans are changing, which is also why it's so important to not announce anything, right? Because it would be really bad to like announce a bunch of stuff and then go back on it. And that's actually one of the risks we did, is now we expose ourselves with the USDH proposal. I did expose the community to the fact that we are planning a hyperliquid star. But I think the risk of that is like relatively small. Like I really think that that's just such an obvious project to do. But whether it should be done in the super short run, that of course remains to be seen, and that's something that depends a lot on like how the hyperliquid community engages with Sky going forward, and potentially, even if it's unlikely, if Sky wins the USDH vote, then obviously that would mean the hyperliquid star should be massively prioritized. So basically, there are basically, I mean, guess I would categorize it. There's one very large star and then two smaller scale stars that have the potential to sort of grow even larger, coming in the, like, I guess you could say coming soon. And then on the medium term, there's basically at least another 2 stars, and then there's also the executors coming. So 3 executors actually that will be sort of built up. And then alongside that, also a number of other that are planned and sort of slowly getting prepared to be incubated. And then so for the second question is that, so basically the stars that have already been announced and have already had funding committed to them, they don't need additional funding. That's what they've already committed. But all of those that are unannounced, they will still need additional funding in the future. So there's going to be like additional capital transactions happening in the future that will be proposed through the Atlas, and that will then fund these stars. But like I said, we basically don't account for these capital transactions in the profits because they're, when the transfer of funds is done out of the protocol, then there's also and that's also going to result in an inflow of tokens with some value, and to not make the profit number like swing wildly. Both of those just aren't counted. Yeah. I mean, and like I said, yeah. So the ones that already. Oh yeah, one thing to mention is something like Grove right now has already, like, it already has capital committed to it, but it doesn't. The capital hasn't been settled yet, and that will only happen either when it launches its token or at the end of this year when we have to do complete core simplification. So there could be a lot of outflows at the end of this year, right at the moment of core simplification, in order to sort of put all the funds in place to fund all of the Genesis agents, so that we can make sure that no transfers like that happen the following year. And we can set the precedent that the following year it will be completely over for any kind of major fixed transactions. Oh, and then this is the point I wanted to make earlier. This is of course to point out there's still going to be some expenses in the protocol, but they're just going to be like percentage-based expenses. Basically, it is overly simplified. There will be between 4% to 10% of all of like net revenue and expenses. So that's of course much less than what it's been in the past, where it's been something like 1/3 to 1/2 of the profits usually. Instead, it would be order 10%. And then actually something that can happen when the stars are capitalized is it's possible that they're capitalized to such a degree that they actually need more capital than what exists in this, like what's sitting in the surplus buffer. And then one option would then be to just like wait with capitalizing them until the money is there for the surplus buffer. But because like I just don't want there to be any chance to like set the precedent that there's still more transactions and more payments happening beyond the treasury management function into the next year. Then instead, I'm going to propose a mechanism where basically the risk capital that is transferred from Sky's surplus buffer into Stars continues to sort of play the role of like the complete final backstop in the ecosystem before USDS would get damaged by insolvency. So that just technically what that means is it's actually possible to make the surplus buffer go negative because the capital that will sit in the Stars will just help basically cover the capitalization of the overall protocol, and the aggregate capital buffer would not go down when you move capital from one. I mean, so currently the data point that's referred to as aggregate capital buffer is already like this. That when you do a capital transaction, it doesn't change; it just remains the same number because you're just moving sort of capital from one account to another. But then we would also actually institute a rule that this would formally be capital that is actually directly acting as the backstop in USDS, so that it doesn't easily create any insolvency risk for USDS. Okay. So after the penalty, what happens if at least 15% of the MKR don't get upgraded? Should we consider that as lost MKR? I mean, it's impossible to say. Like, I think some people certainly believe that a significant amount of MKR is lost, and MKR that doesn't upgrade within like a couple of months of getting the first penalty is unlikely to ever upgrade or could wait a really long time before it upgrades. But I really don't know. I mean, I actually thought it would be a lot more that wouldn't upgrade based on looking at this trajectory earlier, but now I can see there's actually quite a lot migrating now. So it remains to be seen how many. Obviously there's some of it that's stuck, but it's hard to say how much. All right. Can we just offer them a Chronicle-like points farm so they can raise money themselves if they need more to launch? Yeah, so actually a lot of the Genesis agents are not just getting funding from Sky. The ones that are getting significant funding from Sky are the ones that are the really, really valuable and promising ones. So basically those deals are made because it's going to be absolutely worth it in terms of the token farms benefiting, driving revenue back to Sky through USDS farms, and then directly driving staking rewards to Sky stakers through Sky staking. But every single one, like the definition of a Genesis agent is it's one that is receiving funding from Sky. So all of the Genesis agents all receive some sort of funding from Sky. And then in some cases also receive external funding. In other cases, it's exclusively Sky. Do you have plans for a strong marketing push for Sky and Stars? I believe the project is significantly misunderstood and under-recognized in the market. Its value proposition isn't immediately obvious, and there doesn't seem to be a centralized resource that clearly articulates what it is and why it matters. A focused effort to clarify and communicate its essence could make a substantial difference. Yeah, so I totally agree with that. And basically the answer is yes, there is a plan for this. And one is the kind of the trying to explain and educate on the merits of use of how Sky agents basically is a superior form of capital formation. And this is a type of message that's like, it targets like a different audience than what Sky has been trying to communicate directly to in the past, right? Which is really like institutional professionals, right? It's like a concept that's like requires a lot of financial knowledge to really understand. But that seems to be where the product market fit is for Sky. That it's like amongst the really advanced professionals in finance, in particular, that are understand the type of technology that's being built. But also to complement that, there's also the STUSDS launch coming, right? And that's actually like I mean, the STUSDS launch is basically planned as like a real marketing push in the sort of old school sense, right? With incentives and just lots of trying to build lots of awareness. And the reason is that while all the other pieces of the ecosystem can be quite hard to understand at first glance, STUSDS is pretty straightforward because it's just it's just yeah, I mean a dollar referenced asset with a very high rate of return and also high risk. Are there still DAI positions open that will require NKR to close? If so, is it possible that we are incentivizing some NKR from being migrated? I think the answer to this is no. I don't really think that this is a thing. This is I mean, this is hilarious because this is actually requiring NKR to close DAI positions is something that existed literally at this point. It is more than 5 years ago. Because that was how the single collateral DAI system worked, which was launched like 7 years ago. Sorry to ask so many questions and feel free not to answer. Can we get a booth at CES in Vegas in Jan 2026? AKA a push for attending regular non-crypto focused events. Well, I mean, I can't really answer that. That's like the marketing and communications team. But my experience is that Sky is just not really you can't really explain it to normies so well. You can explain it to I think STUSDS has a good chance of being something you can communicate to crypto natives and crypto degens. And I think they will be able to sort of compare it to something like USDE, so basically a stable token, but with like a bit higher risk and then a high reward. So if you're sort of feeling technically savvy and you feel like you want to grasp it, it can be interesting to hold to get that better than average reward. But for sort of where the opportunity is to actually kind of grow the pie, I think the focus should really be on like TradFi basically and on financial professionals. And that's like a part of like the kind of the revamping the communication and marketing of Sky is trying to make things like make it even easier for terminology and the brand and all of that to basically translate over to people who have traditional financial experience and are now beginning to be very open to crypto. All right. Will there be a mobile app as a start focused on simple on and off ramping plus STUSDS? Right now, there's no start under development with this focus. And this is something we used to really look at. It's like this seemed to be an obvious use case. The problem is the business model for doing something, and this just seems to be so crazy hard to get right. And one thing that we've just at this point, we're very much against is using the core to subsidize projects that we have no idea if they're going to actually return value or not. Because that's really, I mean, that's what Maker did for many years in the past, and it just went really badly. And sort of the driver of the star model, right? That like the mechanisms that grow adoption should be inherently profitable, so that you don't have the core making a bunch of political governance decisions, and then nobody's accountable if it's if nothing is achieved, right? So we've basically cut ourselves off from kind of like subsidizing something like this, and instead it would somebody will have to figure out how to make this business model make sense with a startup in a way where it's sort of it's immediately obvious that it makes sense as a business and that they're possible to raise funds to make it happen. I do know though that there are some there are some mobile apps that are looking at basically on and off ramp and STUs, yes, just not I'm just talking about like general projects out there that I'm aware of, and not something that's like specifically incubated or being pushed by Sky. Was the date where we can borrow against the Sky already announced? No, but it's coming very soon. It was actually supposed to be live. Basically, it was supposed to launch like, I mean, basically now, but due to some security reasons and to just really make sure that it's going to be very, very safe, it was delayed. So it's actually technically the system is it's live, like it's on chain now. So the entire mechanism that enables that can basically launch STUSDS and increase the borrowing capacity against Stake Sky is already fully live. But it's just not active yet, and then it'll be activated at a later point when everything is ready to fully activate it. And then there's going to be like a really, really crucial security mechanism built into how it works. Actually, two really crucial security mechanisms. The first is that actually liquidations will be entirely turned off at first because the Sky liquidity is still too low. So basically, you could easily manipulate and it's like, you know, potentially do a liquidity cascade of all the positions until Sky liquidity has grown more. And then the other security mechanism is that there is something we call a sticky oracle, which basically means that there's going to be like a ceiling on how high the oracle will accept that the value of Sky is. And that ceiling will initially be at basically whatever the price is when it launches, or just around that price. So it could be like around, 7 cents, which is the current Sky price. And so just to sort of oversimplify, what this means is that even if the Sky price goes above 7 cents, from the purposes of borrowing against the Sky, it will still only count as a value of 7 cents. And so the amount of USDS you can borrow per Sky will essentially be fixed as long as the price is above that, the sticky price. And so given the liquidation ratio of 145%, it's something like, I mean, overly simplified, it's about 5 cents per Sky that you will be able to borrow. And then it will actually be quite safe to do so at first because liquidations will be turned off. The price potentially can go above 7 cents, but then of course if it starts falling, the oracle just keeps printing 7 until it actually has to fall all the way below 7. Yeah, but and let me just rephrase that. So do not borrow 5 cents per Sky, because if you do that, then you will get instantly liquidated if the price hits 7 cents. Around that, right? So you should still borrow like way lower than that and really, really be careful. Liquidations will be turned on as soon as there's liquidity to handle it. So like, it's not a good idea to obviously people need to really, really, really manage the risk of their positions. Are there any plans for stars that focus on perps and gambling/bets? Currently, I don't think so. I mean, there's like there could be some, but they're sort of longer term projects, and I don't believe that any of the there were some Genesis agents that looked at this, but in practice, that doesn't seem to be an attractive bet to make, because there's just like a lot of other business models that seem a lot simpler and more likely to succeed. While both perps and gambling is this type of, you have to build network effects with end users, and that can be quite risky to try to make that happen. So I mean, it should still happen. Like there will absolutely be stars that try to do this at a later point, but for the Genesis agents, it's I definitely believe that it's going to be very beneficial if like 100% of them, or at least almost all of them, are like successful, and there are not going to be any Genesis agent duds, right? Where you have a Genesis agent that has some big vision and launches and tries to do some stuff, and then it just totally falls flat. And I mean, that of course goes against the whole concept of stars, which is they're supposed to be able to fail and they're supposed to be able to experiment. But it's just there's just such an extreme amount of opportunity simply in doing the very basic business models of using the allocation system, helping the Sky infrastructure going multi-chain, setting up integrations with accessibility reward, and these like really basic things you can do with Sky primitives. That it's worth it for that just to be like the primary focus um, of all of the Genesis agents, because yeah, like the Genesis agents, they will all give tokens to Sky holders, right? So it's going to be a lot of valuable tokens if we make sure that every single one of these Genesis agents are making profits. When you say that Sky should target financial professionals, are you referring to those primarily interested in SUSDS as a user, or to individuals, institutions looking to launch a star? Yeah, so what's so cool is the answer is there's even more types of users than that. Because those are just the two extreme ends of the capital formation stack, right? You have the super senior position with SUSDS, and then you have like the basically first loss, so the most junior with like the people behind like star tokens. But what Sky also will be offering is also external junior risk capital. So that's a little bit more senior in some sense, or at least it's like a different type of junior risk capital compared to holding star tokens themselves. And then there's also senior risk capital, which is also a different risk profile. And in TradFi, there's like people who specialize in all these types of capital, and especially who specialize in like sort of the possibilities when you put all of them together. So I think, and then there's also this whole concept of like basically packaging crypto into TradFi wrappers. So like also sort of distribution mechanisms, and there's a lot of opportunity for all of that, especially if like over the next couple of years we can succeed in getting the rating of USDS up. Then that will actually create potentially these like unlimited demand funnels, where if you have the correct rating and you have the right yield, then basically you can sort of tap into like unlimited demands if you're the best yield at that rating. That's an oversimplification, but like that is the type of potential this guy can get to, where it can just like fully synergize with the entire financial system. All right. Irene, are there currently any bounties or commissions for bringing organizations or cash products into the USDS ecosystem? In other words, is there an open source business development model for BD contributors? Note, I was thrilled to see you competing for the USDH RP, but where there's no active hunting going on. So actually and it's called the accessibility reward. So basically like if a front end integrates USDS, they earn 10 basis points on all the USDS that their users hold through the front end. And then there's sort of a star that manages each of these integrations. So for instance, Spark is the one that manages the integration on Aave. And as a result, Aave gets 10 basis points for the. In fact, actually, Spark may be taking the whole 20 basis points. But anyway, like in theory, I'm not sure if this is exactly how it works, but this could work quickly. So in theory, Aave could get 10 basis points on every USDS they have on the platform. And Spark would also get 10 basis points on every USDS that Aave has on the platform, because Spark is the one that sort of owns the integration. And then you're going to have like basically different stars compete in order to bring in more integrations and bring more USDS adoption, and getting sort of getting a cut of all that adoption. What is the borrow rate to borrow against Sky? So right now it's 20%, but it's locked, right? You can't borrow more. And once STUSDS launches, it's going to initially it's going to launch at 20%. So people will be able to borrow more 20%. And then it will equilibrate depending on basically how much demand there is for STUSDS and how much demand there is for Sky borrow. So It's not really possible to predict, but I could imagine something like 10 to 15%, which if that's the case, would be STUSDS, a pretty cool product. I think. All right. Should we consider introducing additional incentives to accessibility rewards to drive broader adoption of SUSDS? I feel like it would immediately accelerate usage and growth. So we've tried. Actually, right now there is a special incentive in place. So actually, there's an additional 40 basis points, which means that the economics don't add up right now. So like Sky sort of pays more than it earns on whenever Spark gets SUSDS users in. But I'm just generally not really like, I don't think this is a clever approach, because we basically, for every other project out there, that's like the right way to do it, and it's the only way to do it. For Sky specifically, we can instead simply use our capital for capital formation and just launch more and more stars. And then what's really cool is, at least with the Genesis agents, is like, not only do we get this like autonomous economic unit that goes out and basically grows the ecosystem and integrates with partners and infrastructure, but also we get a bunch of tokens that we then use for yield farming, which then just automatically attracts some more capital to the ecosystem. Perhaps heavily limit what people can borrow, say 30% of Sky value, since liquidations are generally bad for the project. We could consider raising it later on once things are more stable and the smart buyback module is live. Also, STUSDS is probably going to have limited deposits at start, so this way more Sky holders can take loans instead of having demand exceed supply. One of my worries is STUSDS leads to people taking large loans to buy Sky, which pumps the price to double and take loan. Right. Okay, so this is I was talking about this earlier. So this is actually dealt with through the mechanism called the sticky oracle. So basically, there's going to be like a fixed limit on how much users can borrow per Sky, regardless of how high the Sky price goes. And then that sticky oracle price will then sort of slowly increase over time and eventually become like an algorithm. So it's actually like a permanent feature that will be implemented on chain. And so it'll be an algorithm that basically says when the Sky price goes up, the sort of effective oracle price will slowly go up, but it will not instantly follow the market price. It will slowly trail behind the market price. And then if the market price remains very high for a very long time, then the sticky oracle price will go all the way to match the market price. And then, of course, if the market price crashes, the sticky oracle will crash just as fast. So it can go downwards with unlimited speed, but it can only go upwards very slowly. And that prevents this like self-referential bubble from popping. And another thing is probably like the speed of the sticky oracle, right? So like how slow it is could be determined by the perceived volume of Sky. So basically, the more liquid Sky is, the faster it could be allowed for the sticky oracle price to climb upwards. Okay, is there a slide deck / pitch that explains Sky to prospective investors? After all, Sky is a new ticker, and many people will be curious to learn more about it once they see it listed on Binance. There's no pitch deck. There's the website, and which is being reworked basically to coincide more or less with Sky launch on Binance and STUSDS launch. And then also there's going to be like some videos that basically, and again, there's like this reinvention of how to communicate Sky and who the core audience is that will be focusing a bit more on TradFi. All right, one last question. With everything going on, what is the number one priority you see for Sky now? Yeah, that's a good question. So that is the development of what we call sometimes we refer to it as the phase 2 allocation system. and also refer to it as the V2 planner. But basically, this is like the AI powered, highly flexible and adaptive, basically like algorithm that that is compatible with the allocation system, which already exists today, right? So the on-chain components of the allocation system already exist today. But right now, when Spark and Grove they deploy, they essentially do it manually or with sort of quite manual processes. And then there's this super advanced real-time, basically data-driven and even using AI for things like data cleaning and using combinatorial search for decision making, which will then just be able to like sort of squeeze out more efficiency out of the ecosystem and make it really, really easy for brand new stars to come in and just immediately run a supercharged allocation system right out the gate. And I basically think like finishing that is going to make it really easy to launch a lot of stars. And that's pretty much what's coming next, right? Like lots of stars, and every single star will have a very powerful allocation system, and then they're all going to specialize in different niches. So they simply go and tap into the best possible opportunities in every single niche. And then from there, the only thing that then matters is just raising more capital for more stars and just making the whole system larger and larger and more capital intensive. And that will ultimately result in the risk adjusted return on SUSDS going up, which is then gonna make the whole flywheel take off. Could you explain what capital formation really means and why you're so excited about it? Is it something similar to what Michael Saylor is doing by effectively securitizing Bitcoin through his various strategies and vehicles? I'm starting to get the sense that you're trying to do something similar in the stablecoin space, almost like securitizing the stablecoin market to serve participants across a range of risk profiles. Yes, I mean, okay, so in some sense, I mean, what Sky's doing is kind of like the opposite of Michael Saylor in many ways, right? In that Michael Saylor is just like sort of no. It is like it's a good the part where MicroStrategy is a good comparison is that he's using like a bunch of different instruments and bringing them together, right? So that's sort of the hallmark of like advanced capital formation, right? That you basically like take in different types of capital with different risk appetites, and then you combine them together into something that is like a more effective capital setup for the type of activity that you're trying to do. But then the problem is where MicroStrategy is just so stupid is that it's just YOLOing a single crypto asset. So it's really like wasting the management layer, basically, right? Like it's really, I mean, it's arguably because Bitcoin doesn't have DeFi, then it does. There's definitely value created by MicroStrategy, but it's just like it's definitely I'm not too happy with like I wouldn't really compare it to stars because the point of the stars is that they are like hyper rational about being set up to exhaustively analyze all available data and then figure out what is the best possible way to deploy this capital, right? So instead of being a sort of vibes thing, it's like actually like a very efficient and very logical way to basically deploy capital, like have different rational economic actors deploy capital together and then get basically get a better return on that capital than what they could get individually. And if you can do that and you can prove that works and you can sort of prove it mathematically, then you can really start to just like vacuum in gigantic amounts of capital, right? Because that's really what Sky aims to do. It just aims to be like a better, more efficient place for capital to live and thrive and grow. And this is then what's going to make Sky just continuously, like, not only will it continuously receive more and more capital inflows, because you basically have people that are holding their capital in less efficient ways that will want to tap into all of the network effects and all of the like basically the infrastructure and the Sky primitives and all of the value that Sky provides, all the economies of scale as well. So that's one thing, that you just have this like inflow from external capital. But what's even more important is that you have literally like the creation of capital out of nothing, in a sense, right? Essentially through outperformance. So that's something like Spark, which is like, it got a 25 million capital injection from Sky, but it's now like generating something like 40 million by itself per year. So if you just wait 1 year, Spark will already be more than twice as capitalized as what it was when it was created by Sky, right? So a rate of growth like that, where a single star can kind of double in size every year, obviously is going to just expand wildly out of control, right? If you start to scale it up and you can actually maintain that type of efficiency and outperformance at scale. All right, I will do one last question, then we can call it a night. Or day, or whatever time it is for you. Earning from staking is a taxable event in most countries. Is there a ST Sky to avoid this? So there is not going to be something like a red sky or ST Sky or S Sky or something like that. The reason for that is because it's very important that state Sky actually participates in governance over time. And it's very dangerous if you have, these like external wrappers being able to accumulate Sky from sort of the from especially if they can trustlessly accumulate Sky for many different participants, but then take control of the votes. So it's basically not safe to directly allow wrapping of Sky and even something like Yearn actually falls under this, and is actually something that's dangerous if it grows to be very big. So the way the system will be able to protect against this is that it will be able to force unstake stakers eventually. That's a feature that's like going to come far in the future, because it's like a very long-term tail risk kind of mechanism, but it is needed regardless. Now there are actually other ways to kind of modify how the stake and reward works, in order to just make like basically just like structured in a way that is like most desirable. And it really should be that like, it should be possible to sort of decide how you want to get the reward in a whole range of different ways. Just because, it could be for all sorts of reasons people would prefer that. So that is something that I think is, that should come, and that I think is very important feature to have. And it should also be possible to do things like, buy more, use your rewards to buy more Sky, or use all, farm one star token and then use that to buy another star token, or instantly sell, or like all of those things. And especially, of course, just like, using your rewards to buy more Sky and then staking and get even more rewards. Like this should be automatically built in, for sure. Yeah. All right. Thanks for your time, everybody, and all the questions. And I guess we will meet again in a week.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the active engagement. And as already mentioned, we really want this to be community driven. So any feedback, please send our way, especially for the deep dive sessions. Thank you all.